Murder mystery at Tamarac apartment complex turns into a crime scene after a young woman's body was found inside. Family and friends gathering throughout the day had word of her untimely passing.
Local 10's Janine Stanwood is live from the scene with what she's learned. Janine.
There are still so many questions about what happened to this young woman. Initial reports, which you're about to hear, are disturbing. And right now you can see deputies and law enforcement are still here as loved ones gather to say goodbye.
All units need to stand by where they are.
Into the night, an investigation into how a young woman died inside her apartment in Tamarac. Family tells us she is 23-year-old Kayla Hodgson, and loved ones say she hasn't been living here in the Tamarac Village apartments for very long. According to the Broward Sheriff's Office, it was around 3 p.m. when they got the call about an unresponsive woman.
The caller says that there's a gash on the patient's neck. It looks like someone slashed her neck.
When deputies and fire rescue arrived, they determined she was dead. Throughout the day, distraught friends and relatives showed up on scene, many telling us they were too upset to speak on camera. Crime scene investigators taking photos of this white SUV before it was towed away. And a forensics truck has been here most of the day. The sheriff's office being tight-lipped about how this young woman died and who could be responsible.
At 5 in the morning, someone knocked on Kayla Hodgson's door. Kayla had never met the woman standing on the other side of it. She had no reason to expect her, no reason to be afraid of her, no context for who she was or why she had come. She was 23 years old, waking up in her own apartment in Tamarac, Florida, on what should have been an ordinary morning. It was not an ordinary morning. The woman at the door had flown in from New York days earlier. She had used a fake Uber account to get there. She was wearing a wide-brim hat, a COVID-19 mask, and gloves. She was not there to talk. What happened inside that apartment lasted only minutes. By the time it was over, Kayla Hodgson was gone, and the person responsible had changed into Kayla's clothes, cleaned up part of the scene, disposed of evidence, and made it back to her hotel in time to catch a flight home. This is the story of what a social media block costs when it lands in front of the wrong person. Before this case had a crime scene or a courtroom, it had Kayla Hodgson. Kayla was 23 years old. She worked as a flight attendant and picked up bartending shifts for special events on the side. Two jobs that both require keeping a smile on your face while managing other people's stress. By every account from the people who knew her, she had more than enough personality left over after the workday ended. Her friend Swan described her without hesitation. Sweet, the life of the party, always had something kind to say. At her sentencing hearing, family members who had traveled to Broward County to speak for her described Kayla as a fashionista, someone with a loving personality who would help anyone who needed it without being asked. Someone who made a room feel different when she walked into it. She had 2 jobs, a full life, and a future she was actively building. None of that had anything to do with what was coming for her. Notice this. Kayla Hodgson had no idea she was standing at the center of someone else's obsession. As far as she knew, she was just a 23-year-old with 2 jobs, dating a man, living her life in Tamarac Village apartments. She was not warned. She was not given the chance to protect herself. And she deserved far more than 23 years. Drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from, and tell us what you know about Kayla that you want people to remember about her. To understand how Kayla Hodgson ended up in this story, you need to understand the man who connected her to it. His name is Terry. That is the only name that ever surfaced publicly. No last name, no full account, no real reckoning for the role he played in setting this in motion. He was the ex-boyfriend of Sakiyna Thompson and, at the time of the murder, the man Kayla was dating. Whatever the actual status of Terry and Thompson's relationship was, something had not been communicated clearly enough to stop what followed. Thompson was going through his phone regularly, not once out of curiosity, but as a pattern. Family members close to the situation said she had been doing this for a while by the time things escalated. She found Kayla's name. She found what she was looking for. What she did next was not confront Terry. She turned her attention entirely toward Kayla, a woman who, as far as anyone can establish, was simply dating a man who told her he was available. Notice this. The person Thompson was actually upset with was never the one she went after. The person she targeted was a 23-year-old with no involvement in whatever unresolved business existed between Thompson and her ex. Terry walked out of this story with a first name and nothing else attached to him. Two women paid every price in this situation. He paid none. What do you think accountability should have looked like for him? Tell us in the comments. 2 weeks before Kayla died, Sakiyna Thompson posted a video online. She titled it, Step 1. She posted another. She titled it, Step 2. No one watching knew what Step 3 was going to be. What had triggered all of this? Kayla had blocked Thompson on social media. That was the spark. Somewhere in New York, a block notification landed, and Thompson treated it like a declaration of something that required a response. Not a message, not a phone call, a plan. According to prosecutors, she did not act impulsively. She did not get on the first flight she could find. She flew from New York to South Florida days before the murder, giving herself time, giving herself a window, giving herself the opportunity to choose what came next. She used a fake Uber account to get to and from Kayla's apartment, making it harder to trace her movements. She arrived in disguise at 5 in the morning. That is not a blackout. That is a timeline with steps already numbered. Subscribe to Crimes That Happened right now and turn on notifications, because what happened inside that apartment and how investigators built the case against Thompson is the part that matters most. And we are about to get into all of it. Kayla answered the door. She let Thompson in. Whether that was because she didn't recognize her through the disguise, because she chose to engage, or because the situation moved faster than she could process it, the outcome was the same. The encounter escalated immediately. Thompson would later claim in court that Kayla attacked her first, that Kayla struck her over the head and cut her stomach with a piece of glass from a hookah, that she feared for her life and the life of her unborn child. She said she blacked out and came to with Kayla already gone. But investigators found something that made that account very difficult to hold up under scrutiny. The physical evidence at the scene, the state of the apartment, the steps Thompson took immediately after changing into Kayla's clothes, cleaning up part of the crime scene, throwing away evidence, and then making it back to her hotel in time for a flight home, did not reflect the aftermath of someone who had no memory of what had happened. Kayla never got to call for help. Her neighbor, Sheila Hernandez, speaking to media after the arrest, said the news had genuinely frightened the building. She said the arrest finally made her feel safer. By that afternoon, the Broward County Sheriff's Office had officially opened a murder investigation. Investigators quickly zeroed in on a white Range Rover parked outside the apartment complex, nicer than anything else in that lot, and belonging to no one who lived there. The Broward County Sheriff's Office put together a case that left very few gaps. Flight records placed Thompson in South Florida before the morning of July 13th. Cell phone data tracked her movements. Items recovered from the apartment connected her to the scene. The fake Uber account she had used to travel to and from Tamarac Village Apartments was traced back to her. Surveillance footage from the building showed a figure in a wide-brimmed hat, a COVID-19 mask, and gloves arriving at Kayla's door. A warrant was issued for Sakiyna Thompson's arrest on the 25th of July 2022. But Thompson was not in Florida. She was back in New York, going about her life, while an entire community in Tamarac was trying to process what had happened in their building. On the 3rd of August 2022, 12 days after Kayla died, Thompson was arrested in New York. She was extradited back to Florida to face a single charge: first-degree murder. Notice this. For nearly 2 weeks after Kayla's death, the woman responsible was in New York living her life. The evidence that eventually caught Thompson was not dramatic or surprising. It was flight records, cell data, and items she left behind. She made a plan that was detailed enough to involve a fake Uber account and a disguise, but not detailed enough to account for what investigators can do with a phone and a flight itinerary. What does that tell you about how premeditated this actually was? Tell us in the comments. 2 years passed before the case reached a courtroom. When it did, Thompson took the stand in her own defense. She told the jury she had gone to Kayla's apartment uninvited to talk woman to woman to have a conversation about the fact that both of them were dating the same man. She said the discussion became complicated. She said Kayla attacked her first. She said she blacked out and had no memory of the actual killing. She told the jury she was walking in blood when she regained awareness. The prosecution described Thompson as jealous and insecure. They walked jurors through the evidence, the premeditation, the disguise, the fake Uber account, the flight records, the steps she took to cover the scene after the fact. They pointed to the fact that she arrived at 5 in the morning, in a hat and mask and gloves, at the apartment of a woman she had never met, as evidence that she had not gone there to talk. The jury heard 4 hours of closing arguments centered on one central question. Did Thompson plan this, or did she act in self-defense? They took that question into a room in October 2025. Subscribe to Crimes That Happened right now. What the jury came back with, and what Kayla's family did when they walked into that sentencing hearing, is something worth being here for. The jury did not need long. After 1 hour of deliberation, they returned to the courtroom. The state of Florida versus Sakiyna Thompson, guilty of murder in the first degree. Kayla's family had been in that courtroom. They had waited more than 3 years for that word. When the verdict was read, they embraced each other, cried, and held on. Family members told reporters they were so thankful the jury was able to see the story for what it was, that Kayla did not deserve to die the way she did. For a woman who had done nothing more than block someone on social media, that verdict was the only form of justice available. 2 months after the verdict, Kayla's family walked back into that courtroom for sentencing. 10 family members and friends spoke before the judge that day. Several of them wore shirts with Kayla's photograph on the back. Justice for Kayla printed across their chests, so that no one in that room could look away from who this was actually about. Her cousin, Melanie John, addressed the court directly. She said what Thompson had done was wicked and evil, and that a person like that should never see the light of day again. Another cousin, Alicia Mitchell, spoke more quietly. She said she felt like she could finally start some type of healing, that it would never be the same, that they would forever miss Kayla, and that at least the person responsible was being held accountable. Notice this. Alicia used the word finally. After 3.5 years of investigation, trial delays, a defense built on a story the jury rejected in an hour, and 2 months between the verdict and the day the family got to speak finally. That word carries everything about what it costs a family to wait for a system to move at its own pace, while they carry grief that does not pause for court dates. What stood out to you most about how this family showed up for Kayla? Tell us in the comments. The judge sentenced Sakiyna Thompson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old. She worked 2 jobs that both required her to show up and be kind to strangers every single day. Swan described her as sweet, the life of the party, and always having something kind to say. Her family called her a fashionista who would help anyone who needed it. She was building something. She deserved more time to build it. Sakiyna Thompson will spend the rest of her natural life in a Florida prison because she could not accept that a relationship she was already no longer in had moved on without her, and because she numbered her steps, bought a plane ticket, created a fake account, and showed up in disguise to a door she had never knocked on before. Terry exists in this story as a first name and nothing else. 2 women's lives were permanently rearranged around a man who has not had to publicly answer a single question about his role in any of it. The son Thompson was carrying at the time of the murder is being raised by his grandparents, not by either of his parents. That is 3 lives completely rerouted by a relationship that had already ended before any of this ever started. Kayla Hodgson never got to turn 24. She never got to see what came next. Her cousin Alicia said she could finally start to heal. Her cousin Melanie said people like Thompson should never see the light of day again. And her friend Swan said she always had something kind to say. That is who was at the door on the morning of the 13th of July 2022. That is the person the Broward County Sheriff's Office, the state of Florida, and a jury of 12 people spent 3 years making sure was not forgotten. Rest well, Kayla. If this case stayed with you, Drop a comment below and tell us what part of it hit hardest. And tell us where in the world you are watching from. We want to know how far her story has reached. Subscribe to Crimes That Happened. We cover every case all the way through to the end.